We are back now, of course, with our continuing coverage of the midterm elections.
Of course, one of the biggest issues for voters this year has been the economy. So we want to look at how that's impacting the results. And here to help us answer that is NBC News business and data reporter Brian Cheung. Brian, good to have you with us. First, let's just talk about the state of the economy right now and just how big of an issue it is for voters as they were heading to the polls.
Well, good morning, guys. And as a reminder, 8.2% inflation, that's what Americans are dealing with. Although the labor market looking okay with unemployment near multi-decade lows. But we had some exit polling from NBC News done yesterday as those who voted left. And we heard that nationwide, 32% of Americans said that inflation was their top issue. But this was interestingly divided up among the cohorts of people voting as Republicans, where 44% said inflation was the top issue. That's a big jump compared to Democrats, where only 15% of them listed inflation as a top issue. Abortion, in many cases, for Democrats remaining their top issue. Now, this is a bit surprising when you consider the outcome of the midterm elections being a lot more competitive for the Democrats, especially given, well, if inflation was the top issue and more Republicans were saying that, why didn't they perform better in some of these House and Senate races? Interesting to see, but regardless, inflation seeming to be the top issue in these midterm elections.
Yeah, Brian, so this sort of touches on what you just mentioned, but if we talk about some of these key battleground states, of course, Pennsylvania, maybe Georgia, we're still waiting on results there. How does this economic data factor in here? Like, what does it look like in those states in terms of their unemployment rate, things like that, that would help us maybe understand some of the results we're seeing, or maybe not?
Yeah, well, I am your data reporter, so we do have some data here on some individual states. These are a few battlegrounds, certainly not the only ones, but these are the unemployment rates. And again, when we talk about inflation, it's not a good picture, but unemployment and the labor market appears to be very healthy. Now, the average right now nationwide is 3.7%, but I want to highlight two states for you right now. Check out Nevada right here, 4.4%. Las Vegas specifically was very hard hit by the pandemic. Unemployment went up to get this 30% during 2020. So perhaps that could be some of the reason behind Catherine Cortez Masto lagging behind Adam Laxalt in that particular Senate race because of maybe some of the negative views on how that state particularly handled the lockdowns. But I also want to cast a light on Pennsylvania for a different reason. John Fetterman winning that Senate race there, 4.1%, a little bit higher than the national average. But this is a very unionized state. The amount of people in Pennsylvania that are unionized, about 13%, higher than the national average of about 10%. And we've heard John Fetterman and Dr. Oz talk about right to work versus right to unionize. That could be a factor behind what we saw in those results as well.
So, Brian, looking ahead, how is control of Congress going to possibly change economic policies going forward, especially if you have, at least one chamber controlled by Republicans?
Yeah, well, inflation is a complicated picture. When we talk about food, for example, there are just shortages that really can't be done regardless of who's in power. But look, there's a lot of other things that factor into the economy beyond inflation. Possible rise in unemployment. You're hearing some Wall Street firms say we could be entering a recession next year. That's going to be something that the next Congress is going to have to deal with. But it's not the only thing. There's a debt ceiling debate that's likely going to happen very soon in the next Congress. Federal funding is going to enter in the fold. Does that enter the possibility of a government shutdown during a time of recession? Also, remember, there are other types of issues right now. Antitrust, big tech legislation. Does that get thrown under the bus if it is indeed the case that the Republicans take the House, but it's still a Democratic administration? And then lastly, again, unionization, as I just illustrated with Pennsylvania, very much a factor of this tight labor market that we're probably going to expect to see some debate on as well.
All right, Brian, laying it all out. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.